All right, game number 66 for the Boston Celtics as they conclude their three-game road trip against the Minnesota Timberwolves. I am your host, Joseph Pavone for CLNS Media. I'm joined by Jerry Zgoda of the Star Tribune. Welcome back to the pregame report, Jerry. Thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome.
All right, game number 66 for the Boston Celtics as they conclude their three-game road trip against the Minnesota Timberwolves. I am your host, Joseph Pavone for CLNS Media. I'm joined by Jerry Zgoda of the Star Tribune. Welcome back to the pregame report, Jerry. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, it's funny how people here can grumble. You know, they hadn't made the playoffs in 14 years, and at one point, you know, people were grumbling, and they were still like third or fourth in the West, and they were on track to win 50 games. Even though you know, even before, but then Butler gets hurt. But you know, they're on track to win 50 games. But they've had, you know, a number of games they should have won. They lost to teams, all kinds of teams in the East. They've lost to Orlando and you know, just like 4 or 5 different teams, and they lost to Memphis, lost to Phoenix twice. So you know, they could be much further ahead than they are. Now they've got to get through this stretch where they're playing without Butler, and they're coming up to not a busy time. They played more games than anybody in the league leading up to the All-Star break, and now they've got a 5-day break, and they've got kind of a cushion in the schedule. But they play some tough teams. They've got Boston coming up Thursday night. They've got Golden State. They've got to play San Antonio, Washington, Houston, all in a 5-game stretch. So you look in the West, and you know, they look pretty comfortable. They're third, they're fourth. All of a sudden, they go on the road. They lose at Portland. They lose at Salt Lake City. And in one night, they go from third place to sixth place, and they go back to fourth, and they go back to fifth, even without playing. So we'll see if there's some separation between teams here as we come down these last 4 or 5 weeks. But this thing could get pretty interesting, you know, when you come down to the end of the season. You know, they've done well against the West. They've done well against teams in their own division, so they're looking pretty good on tiebreakers. But you know, there's 4 or 5, 6 games they probably should have won against teams they should have beaten.
It sounds very familiar. It reminds me a lot of the Boston Celtics. I mean, they've dropped games against the Chicago Bulls. They've dropped games against the Orlando Magic as well. But they've also topped teams like the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors. So it sounds very familiar to what we've seen this season out of the Boston Celtics. Who are some of the guys who've impressed you the most coming into the regular season? Some of the guys that you didn't expect to perform at a high level who've come through for the Timberwolves this year?
Well, you know, I don't know how much people expected, or I expected, you know, Jamal Crawford would have left, but you know, at 37, he's still going strong, and you know, he's a pretty good force on the. You know, they don't have a great bench. It's one of their weaknesses. It's even weaker now that Butler's out, and they've had to move Nemanja Bjelica to a starter. They're basically only playing 3 guys off their bench, but you know, Crawford's a guy who. It has been better than I thought. I wasn't sure what he had left in him, but you know, he may have a couple of years still. I think the other guy, probably their best guy. I mean, obviously Butler's their best player. You know, Wiggins and Towns are their stars, but the guy who's really held everything together is Taj Gibson. I mean, he's been really good, and great for us too. Not that anybody cares, but great for us too in the media. Just a stand-up guy who's always there, win or lose, ready to talk and willing to talk. And but he's been really good for them. He's been a rebounder, a good guy to put next to Towns to show him, you know, what defensive positioning and will is all about. And you know, Towns has had a pretty good year, really good year, All-Star year, and they're still waiting to see on Wiggins. Wiggins has played better when Butler hasn't been on the floor. When I think he's still trying to figure out how to play with a guy who's sort of so dominant on the wing, and hasn't figured that out yet. But circling back to your original question, I mean, if you had to look at guys who were sort of the surprises or they gave more than you expected, it's certainly Gibson and Crawford.
You know, that's a guy that I would have loved to see in a Celtics jersey a few years back when Brad Stevens was still, you know, a rookie coach himself. You know, I just think he's one of those glue guys that could really put things together and be that spark off the bench. What's the latest on Jimmy Butler? Is that someone that they are going to expect to see before the playoffs, right when the playoffs start? What's the latest on him?
Well, let's see. All we really know is that he wants to be back by the playoffs. He's aiming for it. Now we'll see. I mean, those things are. They didn't really release exactly what kind of meniscus surgery, and I think it was somewhere in between. It wasn't certainly wasn't one of those full repairs that leaves guys out 3 to 6 months. But you know, I think 4 weeks at the minimum, which puts you at the end of March, and then you know, you've got 10 10, 11 days before the playoffs come. So, I mean, if you see him by the playoffs, I would think that'd be a pretty remarkable comeback and recovery. If they get to the playoffs, that was always for a team that hasn't made it since 2004. That was just sort of a foregone conclusion. Then he gets hurt, and then you look at the West. Add up the four teams leading in the West, and how many consecutive games they've won together, and the number you get is 39. You got like 15 with Houston, you got 9 with New Orleans, you got 8 with Portland, and those slackers, the Warriors, coming fourth with like 6 in a row, I think. So, it's if you're trying to catch up, it's going to be hard, getting back into that home court advantage. I mean, it's not impossible, but we'll see where the Wolves are once they get through these next 5 games.
This edition of the Celtics pregame report is brought to you by SeatGeek. The easiest way to shop for Celtics tickets is by downloading the SeatGeek app. And when you enter the promo code Garden Report, you can save yourself $20 off your first purchase. That's SeatGeek. Download the app, enter the promo code Garden Report, and save yourself $20. Jerry, what's it going to take for the Timberwolves to knock off the Celtics tonight, in your opinion? What are some of Minnesota's weaknesses that Boston should look to expose tonight?
Well, I mean, keys for them is Jeff Teague has played a lot better since Butler's gone out, and he's a guy when he's scoring and aggressive, they got a fighting chance even without Jimmy. When he's in the 20s somewhere and causing the defense to collapse. He's one guy to watch. The thing when the Wolves play teams like Boston, when you're looking at the downside of it is. It's just simple math. It's hard for them to keep up against teams that shoot a lot of threes. They're not built that way, and when they play Houston, it's a terrible matchup for them because they just can't keep up. Three. Last I checked, 3 is still worth more than 2. So that's the kind of the modern sort of NBA team they struggle with. They're very efficient in what they do, but Wiggins, even with Butler when he's healthy, the best 3-point shooter is probably Karl Towns, their 7-footer.
Who do you think wins tonight? What's your prediction?
Well, I think the Celtics do, but I also think the Wolves are going to beat somebody they shouldn't in this 5-game stretch. And I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to be the Warriors, but it could be the Warriors on Sunday. I think they're going to because you look at it and you think, well, they could lose all 5 of these games that come, and I think they're going to win 1 or 2 of them, and then they'll probably go to a place like New York and lose. So. Just the way they go, but I still think the Celtics are better. But it wouldn't stun me if the Wolves win because I think they're going to have a surprise in there somewhere.
All right, he is Jerry Zgoda of the Star Tribune. You can check out his work on the sports section of StarTribune.com, and of course, give him a follow on Twitter at Jerry Zgoda. Jerry, I appreciate you taking the time, man, and we'll talk again soon sometime.
Zuri, I like that. Maybe I'll start using that.
I had to say Jerry and mix it in there, Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Celtics pregame report. Make sure you check out the Celtics postgame show on clnsmedia.com. You can call in toll free at 347-215-7771 after the game to get on the air. Or just like this show, you can listen to it on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. Weekday shows air on the Celtics Newsfeed channel, on iTunes, Stitcher, and the CLNS Media mobile app. You can also check out this edition of the Celtics pregame report on the clnsmedia.com website, as well as the Celtics postgame show on clnsmedia.com. For today's Boston Celtics pregame report with Josue Pavone, this is Josue Pavone signing off.